Urshtamalaklin tuntai, strun wakalakaristo horai. Astun to korokai hondri hulabarakte nonstaimo alla kru stamaklur rain sumbragilego wagero. Asimi uririn tu ha. Isumarorge. I'd like to demystify a few concepts and some of the issues that we're having as we continue to create new language and translate concepts that we're bringing forth. So this has a lot to do with bridging information into different communities, but it's also going to provide some people with information to help them along their way that are more advanced. And so the first thing that I wanted to discuss was this concept of when we move beyond the solar spiral, once we've, really understood how the consciousness of every planet is part of us and how it's playing out, how those rhythms and those sounds are playing out within our bodies and spiraling out and creating our lives, creating the constraints around our reality fields, and also creating the basis, the base energies, the base metals from which we make our decisions, and also how they shape, they bring forth past life experiences, how they bring forth different experiences into our lives, into our present experience of being alive, and how that sort of plays out. So all these energies are spiraling. So you can imagine your spiral, how the energy is spiraling. That's your vortex, your toroidal field, and all of these energies, these planetary energies, are spinning to create your specific vortex. So this has been the basis of my work, and learningtospiral.com is based on this concept of mastering these energies. So first, to master anything, you have to understand it within and without. And once you start to understand how these energies, based upon your exact time of birth, the planets will have been in a specific area in the sky. So we can see the sky, the cosmos, as a direct reflection of what is within our bodies, and how they are mapped out will determine how they are laid out and how they are influencing every layer of our being, from our organs to like our physiology, how our health is functioning, and what sort of challenges we have, or what sort of strengths we have, and then also moving all the way down to our preferences. So you can the spiral is also our DNA, but it's this energetic force field around us, and then how we are interacting with that force field, how aware we are of it, will allow us to move energy in different ways. And so seeing the map and understanding it, it doesn't matter. I just want to emphasize that it doesn't matter whether you're looking at the map from a Vedic perspective, from an esoteric perspective, Egyptian astrology, or Western astrology. You're going to be able to see the energies in the same way. So essentially, you're going to be geared. This is why we have the me receptor, Bruce Lipton. We're geared to see and pick up on information that only we can see, that only we can find in the universe. And so essentially, no matter what we're looking at, we can find ourselves. As long as you are tapping into the heart space, and which is the soul spark, then it's just like we're in flow, and we're able to clearly see because we're tapped into our intuition. And And so it doesn't even matter. Like when I started reading tarot cards, I would just read playing cards. This is why you can look at, you could read tea. Literally, the universe is speaking to you. No matter where you look, there you are. So where do you want to look, right? That's always been the question. And depending where you look, you're going to find different information. So it's up to us to choose, but essentially it will all be relevant to who we are and our path. So as we understand this reflection taking place and we tap into the solar spiral, we can then begin to tap into the galactic spiral. So this is where things get really interesting. And I have been trying to bridge many different communities. Like, the language of it has blocked so many people from other communities who are more of a rational mind and haven't, they don't have that power of sight to, they just kind of discredit all that information and don't understand its relevance, or just think it's completely woo-woo, or, that the whole concept of aliens is just absurd because they haven't understood what the true essence of those words are meaning. And so I'm going to throw up a few photos and just to help people understand better. And basically what I want to express is that because of the microcosm and the macrocosm, right, effect taking place, we can constantly tap into beings existing on these lower layers. So if we're looking at it from the Nordic perspective of the 9 worlds, we can tap into these lower realms and gain information about ourselves through smaller beings, through different organisms that exist that are not perceptible to the human eye. But we can still tap into the energies of them because they're living organisms. Everything has consciousness, but especially if it's living, its consciousness is way easier to tap into. And so all these different organisms that exist, these microorganisms that exist, have their own world, right? They have their own reality bubble, and they're existing within a universe of their own. So they don't know, for example, some of these little organisms don't know that they're existing on our skin. They don't know what they're a part of. Essentially, they're just living in their little worlds and interacting in that environment. They can't see the bigger layers, the bigger environments. They can't see what they are actually a part of. And so it's really interesting to look at some of these organisms and to compare them essentially to some of the alien species that we've sketched out and possibly have even captured and found and experimented on laboratories here. So when you look at these microorganisms, they look so similar to a lot of the alien races that we are familiar with and that many of us may have interacted with. So again, this follows the principle, as within as without, as above as below. There is constantly a mirroring that takes place within the universe, going from the smallest scale, smaller than a quark, all the way up to the biggest structures. So if you can imagine that these organisms exist within us and we've captured photos of them, we know that they're real, and you can see them and you can really start to conceptualize the fact that they don't know that they're a part of a bigger organism. They don't know that they're a part of a human organism that functions and has its own reality, that walks around and is even most of the time unaware, right? That these little organisms either live on our skin and our bodies. And so we humans are also little organisms to bigger organisms. Okay, and those bigger organisms are what we call extraterrestrials and alien organisms, alien beings. So this is where there's a bit of confusion, right, that takes place, because just as the smaller organisms, yeah, they're separate from us. They're part of us, but they're also separate from us. Okay, so we are part of these alien species, but we're also separate from them. So there's a lot of information that's still coming in about how all of this is connecting, but this is the basis from which we need to start to look at and understand how all of this functions. So if these little microorganisms within our gut and on our skin can have an influence on us due to their behavior, which is just this innate biological behavior that happens automatically, but they're still influencing so many things within our bodies, within our system. They can influence our mood. They can influence how well we sleep. They can influence what we crave in terms of food. They can influence our preferences, right? Because everything is functioning in this delicate system with hormones balancing and organs that are either functioning at their full capacity or have reduced functioning. And so similarly, our behaviors and actions are also affecting these alien races and species that are larger than us. Okay, so there's many different layers here. Okay, but this is a good frame to look at this from. Okay, because we have to understand how our consciousness is connected to the larger species, so the larger bodies of alien races. And we also have to look at how the organisms, whether that's like parasites within the gut, right, or healthy bacteria that helps the flora grow within the stomach, are affecting each other. So the decisions that we make affect the experience of these larger species. And what happens when the toroidal field starts to activate and open up is that we gain greater insight into both the lower realms and the higher realms. So when we start interacting with different species in different dimensions, we're interacting with something that is real. And similarly, if we start to focus in when we're activated, we can have that sight to focus in, really tune into specific organisms within our body, and then tap into that consciousness and communicate with that consciousness, and then try to bring balance through receiving messages about maybe different things that we have to do for our body to change the interaction with those organisms. So often we can speak of changing our diet, fasting, or including certain herbs in our diet, sleeping more, changing our patterns, spending more time outside, exercising. It's basically the basics. And when we're tapping into these higher, or these, I don't want to say higher because it's more these bigger species. So I'm going to go with smaller and bigger, because lower and higher doesn't really match with with how we can best understand it. So when we tap into these bigger species, we're doing the same essentially, and they can tap into us and start communicating with us just as we can start communicating with them, right? And then they can see us, they want to influence us to affect their experience, just as we often try to influence the little organisms within us to change our experience. And so everything in the universe is trying to come into balance, and not everyone will have access. And not that everyone can't have access, or that certain people can't have access. It's just that not everyone will have access to receiving messages or sending messages. And that all depends on, a whole bunch of different factors, but for sure, light body activation and really maintaining a large electromagnetic field can assist, because, and also being in the heart and understanding that the heart is essentially, it's the portal, it's the stargate into these other worlds and dimensions. So we're all affecting each other from small to big, and when we start connecting with these species, like there's a few people that went through some difficult times. I remember back in 2015-16, and if your third eye is on, you can actually visually start seeing through these different veils and start interacting with these larger species. And just like some of the smaller organisms aren't all positive, some of the larger living entities or organisms, alien species, aren't all good, right? There's different variants, there's different gradients to everything. And this is part of this whole array of emanation that is the universe. We're not going to go into other universes. We're just going to stick with this one for now. So when your third eye is on and these veils start to go down and you begin to interact with larger species, you're going to have to understand that what you're interacting with is dependent on what is also part of you. So to a larger degree. So what is also part of you to a larger degree? Because we're all interconnected. Every single thing is interconnected, but what is of most similar in frequency will be easier to access. And so when you're interacting with these different species, depending on what you need to work through based on your solar spiral, based on all of the energies that is, that are a part of you, and that basically is dictating the natural outcome of your each and every moment, your each and every experience, in order to bring balance, you're going to interact with certain species versus another, right? So some people have, for example, they'll have issues with specific, they'll have specific stomach issues, or they'll have foot fungi. It's like everyone is made so differently. And so we're all going to be interacting with different organisms, whether small or big. And it's always going to be attracting. We're always going to be attracting and having those experiences based on our hardwiring, how we're hardwired, and how the core elements are influencing us. So when this happens, what we are meant to do is to begin to integrate. So this is where the ancestral healing comes in. So I remember back in 2015, a good friend of mine was experiencing a lot with the Draco faction Okay, the dark Dracos. And they had completely left Midgard and had gone into this other realm where they were completely, it's like they had immersed themselves in the world with the larger species. It's not really, it's a combination of astral travel, but it's basically you're projecting your plasma forward and you're projecting it into these different frequencies. And so when that happens, if that happens to you, if it happens again, you have to understand that you're meant to integrate those aspects of yourself because they are essentially connecting to something similar within you. And oftentimes it has to do with ancestral healing. Oftentimes it has to do with going back to the origin of us all, which comes from this sound frequency. And we're having to kind of come to these moments of completion to really move into this next level. So if you start to interact with these beings again, you are meant to do the healing work, tap into the ancestral healing, really find those weak links within your own lineage and own that darkness, own those shadows, right? It could have happened like thousands or millions of years ago, but there are certain events that took place that weaved itself, those events weave themselves into your spiral, into your web of weird. And you find yourself in this lifetime connected to those energies again. Okay, so this is what I've been doing for the last, since my light body activated and I had a Kundalini experience. This is what I've been doing. I've been basically healing, going back into doing the ancestral healing, right? And tapping into this information through myself, through my body, through my psyche, and going into these both past lives and also bloodline to really find these weak links and then basically do the work in order to heal them. And when you heal them, it's just like a wound that finally closes up, right? It just completely closes up and it's healed. And oftentimes it is stronger than it was before you broke your arm. The bone will actually be stronger because it's calcified around that area. So the body is magnificent and the psyche as well is incredibly strong. So we have to trust the process of when this stuff is happening. And it's all about, instead of, fearing what we are being confronted with, it's really about moving towards it with the type of attitude that it takes to own what we are perceiving, and to, if we have to interact on the level that we have to interact on in order to begin to integrate and incorporate and heal whatever it is that this experience is bringing forward for us. Okay, so this is really important. And often when people have these experiences, they're either shut down with medication or they just feel crazy. They don't want to tell anyone. But things are changing slowly, and more people are sharing these experiences, and it's becoming less taboo to talk about them. And it breaks completely out of the frame, out of mainstream society's, kind of normal, this is what we're allowed to experience, this is what we're not allowed to experience. It breaks out of that. And the paradigm is changing. And I wanted to bring forth this, like I have a very practical mind, so I'm able to capture information and bring it forth in a practical way for people who might not understand. They kind of come across information, they're like, oh my God, what are these people talking about? But if you can just understand that within your body there are, I don't know how many thousands or maybe even millions of living organisms, within your own body that you are not aware of, unless you take a microscope out, a really strong microscope, and then start looking at them. So that's what exists as well, that is bigger than us, right? So we'll do this like bigger and smaller. And so we're like these little tiny organisms, right? And then we have to figure out how we're interacting with these bigger species and how we can interact in a healthy way with the smaller organisms. So you have all different types, right? If you look at the photos, I mean, there's some really beautiful looking, I guess let's move up and like, you know, if I'm looking at the insects now, and it's like there's some really beautiful insects that as well mimic this kind of alien structure, right? And then we can move into just like the whole family of like, you know, all the animals that exist on the planet, and look at how different they look. You know, if we're looking at a zebra versus an elephant, right? Or the cat family. Everything in the universe can be categorized into a specific family, whether that's human, whether that's organisms, smaller organisms in the body, insects, or larger alien species. They all have their own families because they share a specific consciousness. And everything that shares a specific consciousness will share similarities in how they look. So it's really easy, like growing up, I would just look at certain people and I'd know what family they were part of based on their bone structure, based on just different aspects, visual aspects, right? Characteristics that they had. So finding your family of within these larger categories is really good. Like it's really good to know what family you're part of, you know? And then this will also help you to understand what galactic family you're part of. We do have different aspects. So even someone who, you know, has done a lot of this work in knowing themselves on a very like even on a universal level, but like, you know, just really understanding all these different concepts and what they're a part of, they're still going to have different aspects to them. So often what we're encountering now as time moves forward, okay, I don't like using the time, but as things have progressed over time, we have become more and more complex. Everything has become more and more complex. It's still at its core simple. It's still light, sound, frequency at its core, but as it's expanded, it has become more complex. So it seems like it's like a lot more different things, but really in essence, it's the same thing. So in essence, everything is very simple, and if we don't boil it down to the bare bones, it could seem very complex. And it is becoming more complex, but essentially it's very simple if you just take the bare elements that have created anything in the universe. And so what we are confronting more and more is the hybridization of everything. Everything has been mixed. And humans have also been mixed, like our DNA contains different root races, so bloodlines, different characteristics from a wide array of DNA. Some people a little less, some people a little more. But I was trying to tune into this, and there's like very, very, very few people on the planet that are completely pure and that haven't been hybridized in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, I'm maybe going to be able to pull in some more information about that at a later time, but for right now, let's just leave it at that. And so when you're dealing with yourself or you're dealing with another person, they may have a predominant energy. They're predominantly part of a specific family, but they also have different aspects within them that are streaming in, and those are part of a different family. So, it's like we're dealing with multiple aspects. And then layered on top of that, we have past life experiences. So these are signature frequencies within the soul. Okay, so it's more within the etheric body, but it can manifest physically, right? But it especially affects our behavior. So we have different layers that we're interacting with within ourselves, but also within other people. So this is where these shadow aspects come in, and there's shadow parts of ourselves that we might not be so aware of because we haven't explored. So, if I'm predominantly cat, for example, I'm predominantly part of the cat family. I still have, aspects of myself that are reptilian. And I mean, almost everybody on the planet, there are some that no longer have any reptilian aspect whatsoever. But most of us still have those structures within the brain, and they're not all negative, right? Like when we speak of reptilian, we often have associated it more and more to negative traits, but there is a sweet spot within the reptilian functioning in the brain that is really what allows us to understand synchronicity and to understand the correspondences, which is like soul speak, right, for us in the universe. It helps us really capture the law of correspondence. So part of ourselves that has developed the reptilian brain and uses it properly, it's a very, very valuable tool, right? But of course there's like the whole other extreme where, it's just, we can go and speak about psychopaths and, people who just are functioning from the reptilian brain from a very myopic perspective, which is just like me, me, me. But if you've evolved spiritually and have incorporated this higher awareness, you can use the reptilian brain for a very important purpose to assist you on your journey. So if these smaller organisms within our body are affecting our behavior, right, the larger species of aliens are also existing on a specific plane, and they have a specific consciousness. So the smaller organisms have a specific consciousness, sound, light, frequency that we can tune into, as well as these higher species. And so when we're tapping into these different worlds and these different species, whether smaller or bigger, we're tapping into a type of consciousness, a type of awareness that either vibrates with our very own light, sound, frequency, because we all have a signature frequency. So it's either vibrating with our frequency, and it's very easy to understand. It's very smooth because you're speaking in a language in terms of consciousness. Like consciousness itself is a very similar frequency. Let's say for me, cat, the cat family in general. Like I just understand that frequency very well. So any living entity within the universe that has cat frequency, I will understand, right? It's like I get you. And so we all get certain types of consciousness over others. And so the challenge is when we're having to interact with these parts of ourselves that are not predominant within our bloodline. So for example, if you are like 50% or 60, let's go with just an extreme. So if you're like 90%, for example, working with specific consciousness, and then you have only 10% of another consciousness, it's going to be more difficult for you to interact with that part of yourself, and even more difficult to interact with that species that's connected to that consciousness, whether that be the smaller or the bigger species. So it makes it more challenging, but if it's still a part of us, if we still have within our own solar spiral, if we have within our own DNA spiral 10% that is connecting with a consciousness that's somewhat foreign to us, we need to integrate that. Like, it's really important, because if not, that aspect of ourselves can control us entirely without our awareness, because our predominant consciousness is this 90% other part of another family and category of way of understanding the world. And so this is why we also do the shadow work, because the shadow work plays in here. And so often what I noticed is that when people go through an awakening and they're going through a healing crisis, they're tapping into that aspect of themselves that they're less familiar with. And it's like they're having to learn about a species that is not familiar to them. They're having to learn about a way that is not familiar to them. So it's really good to understand, all of the families, and to know how all of them interact to a certain degree. You can never, you'll understand some more than others, but just to have a general overview. And once you have that general overview, you can be, when you start to interact with different species, you have different experiences, and, you can sit back and say, this is not part of my predominant frequency, but it's part of me. I need to go and explore this aspect of myself for, X amount of time, whatever it takes, to learn about it enough so that you can see how it's affecting your weaving, your web of weird within the world, and how it's affecting some of the decisions that you're making, and some of the choices, and some of your preferences, and all that. So the more awareness, the more awareness you have about these aspects of self that are braiding themselves in, that have braided themselves into your own DNA, that have braided themselves into your consciousness, then the greater control you have over them. And epigenetics, environment, we can change things in order to turn on or off certain genes. So anything is possible, really, within certain constraints, but within the constraints of this universe, like the universal laws, that's what we're working with. So if you start tapping into these different aspects, and they are scaring you, if you're becoming afraid, or you have a lot of fear and you fall into victim mode, it's a strong sign that you have to take ownership of what it is that you're experiencing and interacting with. And that is essential. That's such an essential part of the healing process. If not, these aspects, and I'm speaking to these, like, if there are negative aspects, and there's always, even if you're 90%, of a really high frequency, there's always going to be a percentage. Like, the higher, the greater the light, the darker the darkness, right? And so understanding these parts of yourselves will allow them not to take over completely. Because when we're dealing with consciousness, if we have a strain of like a quality, a type, a family of consciousness within our body of consciousness, like we can look at it like a parasitic organism, right? With a, let's say if we have parasites in the gut or something, it could be like a really small colony of parasites, right? That have existed there, that were, transposed from generations and generations back, that just stayed within the bloodline. If we don't take care of them, if we don't know what they are, how to interact with them, how to manage it, either eliminate it or learn to have a healthy relationship with it so it doesn't take over, it will completely take over. And it can start to, just like, for example, yeast just grows. It just grows. Fungi, different fungi just grow. If I leave, my kombucha mother there, she's just going to keep on getting bigger and bigger. So we have to understand that this is also what can take place. And so people that don't confront these aspects, don't interact with these species on the level of coming from ownership, coming from a certain level of like, if I see you, it's because you're a part of me, and it's because I have power over you, right? If you don't come at it from that level, then it can start to colonize and start to absorb a lot of the other light, sound, frequency consciousness within your being and slowly take over. So this is why, you can encounter someone, I mean, you're communicating with them, they're communicating on a certain level, and then all of a sudden, a few years later, you speak with that person and it's like they're a completely different person, and they're interacting on a completely different level. Their life has changed, everything has changed. It's because that small percentage that existed within them slowly started to multiply and to colonize within their body, and then on a higher level take over their consciousness and their experience. So this is very important work that we're doing, and I thought it was important to bring about a different kind of perspective and understanding to what all of this is. So when we talk about light language, for example, we're speaking of the core essence, right? So we're removing all these different layers of language and these different layers of ideology and, conceptualization, even methods of conceptualizing. And we're bringing it back down to a sound that only has reference to these really primitive, deeper aspects of self that are connected to, I don't know how many, like it goes from 1 to 2 to 3, but let's say the Trinity, you can bring it back depending on the day and depending on the energy I'm working with. Like the sounds will either be more complex or less complex, but either way, if you're expressing through sound versus words, it's like a whole different ball game. So with my daughter, it's worked beautifully. Like ever since she's a child, we speak together using light language, because if you're trying to express something, especially a child who doesn't, hasn't developed language, doesn't have like a, strong language skills, they can't express themselves the way they want, and so they'll often just cry. But a layer up from that is through sound, and not just crying, but purposeful sound, directing it specifically to express a feeling, a thought. And so even to this day, I'm constantly expressing myself in this way, and my daughter and I will just kind of go at it, and we can go at it for a really long time, and we totally understand what each other is saying. So this is the beauty of it, and especially when, you know, you're angry and you just don't know how to express, like it sort of gets caught, if ever stuff gets caught in the fifth chakra, and it's like, I can't get this out. I need to express this, but I don't have the words to express it. Right? You're saying it on a different level. So this is also something I just wanted to touch on to help people understand. And sound, words can move energy. Words are spells. So we are using sound to create in the world. See, where everything that we're saying is creating in the world. But when you backtrack and you bring it down to the basics, we're moving energy. We're basically just moving energy with sound. So that's why it's really, you can feel the power. Like when you're creating a spell with sound coming from emotion, like the words can't even compare in terms of like how much impact they can have. Like the words have been so brutalized, like you know, certain languages are better than others, but the English language is pretty it's been pretty inverted, and there's many issues with it. So it's just like, even at the language level, even speaking, we're completely blocked from creating the spells we want in the world, and that is, you know, moving energy. It's all about moving energy. So if you're moving energy out of your body, right, as within as without, you're moving energy in the cosmos. And trust me, the more energy you move, the more you're going to have these other aspects trying to shut you down. So this is why protection, learning how to project your plasma into your immediate environment, to know how to use this, to know how to use sound, to know how to use the elements in order to create different healing methods, but also different types of armor and protection, is very powerful. And I've been really fine-tuning this. Like, this is something that I really enjoy using my plasma to create around me. And if I don't do it, it's, you know, I mean, we all go through the whole letting, you know, slacking on certain things, and then boom, the next thing you know, you have some sort of like, you know, infiltration coming at you from one aspect or another. And so when you've secured your space, like, it's the best feeling when no one can get into your space. Like, no one can even like drill a little hole and stick a little hose to start draining your life force. Like, they can't even do it. So learning to project our plasma and create these very sophisticated, through human technology, we're able to do it through, you know, through working our energy fields, through working our torus field properly, and through activating all these centers. When energy is moving, third eye is on, and we're able to see and start creating. If you have trouble or you haven't really come to this space yet, what I recommend is, it can be especially powerful. So if you're okay, so if you are not able to visualize anything or lucid dream, right, or create on that level, then you might be able to interact when you wake up in the night. Okay, if you wake up in the night and you're lying there, when you wake up, don't open your eyes too quickly. Try to keep them closed, and you'll feel yourself moving through these different layers, bringing your awareness back into your body. Okay, and then there's a sweet spot between like the lucid dreaming and the dreaming. I don't know what brain alpha wave it would be. It's kind of like between theta. It's like it's still theta. Um, and so you move through these layers, and so you're aware, you're like, okay, I'm awake, but you haven't come back into this realm yet. In that space, you can do so much healing work. Like, it's the space where you can lucid dream if you're able to do that. But if you're not able to lucid dream, you can still or if you're not able to go into meditation and then project your plasma and start doing things within your field, you can still tap into this area when you wake up in the night, and you can work it from there. You can scan your body going from head to toe, and you should be able to get visual prompts at that point about what's happening. You kind of see, it's like your body becomes transparent. You can see through your body, and you can see little spots. And then if there are any spots that are darker, or that, depending on how much visualization you're getting, it might produce as a specific image. You might see something within your org field, within your body. Then you can just send your plasma into that area and focus it in that area to heal it. And your body will respond. You'll get twitches. Your body actually responds to focusing your energy in one area versus another. And yeah, so you can do work in that state very well, even if you haven't tapped into those other energies. So I would into those other states. So I would recommend that you start from there if you're looking to start building armor and shielding yourself and doing the healing work on an energetic level. And then, of course, I won't give away any of my secrets about my armor, but you can then begin to build as far as your imagination wants to run with it, right? Whatever you can imagine, you're creating in the astral, in that field. So, there's lots of different visualizations that you can do, and it's really going to be customized to you. So it's better not to listen to other people and what they're doing. It's best to just let your imagination run wild, and it's going to do what it needs to do for you and your system to build that protection armor for you. And then from there, it can evolve into, more and more elaborate creations. So from here, I want to go back. I've already spoken quite a bit, but I had a lot of things that I wanted to bring forth. And I'm going to go and try to tie in right now the idea that when our light body goes off and we activate and our torus field starts to expand, like there is the issue. I've been having the issue, after I had that expansion myself, of absorbing toxins from within the environment. This is why people become extra sensitive to their environment and to the different things in it. Whether we're speaking about radiation or whether we're speaking about different frequencies coming from cell towers and the electronics running around us. When your electromagnetic field expands out and you still haven't gotten used to all these frequencies, it's extremely painful, because you're literally, your field is more powerful than most of the fields around you, and so it just sort of like a vacuum, it just sucks it right in, and then you have to transmute it, and you have to really increase your self-care practices so that you're not absorbing it and keeping it within your body, having it kind of leak out into your physical body. So even to this day, I don't hold a cell phone. Like I feel so much, so I can't hold a cell phone. Like my arm will go numb, and I think everybody's arm goes numb. It's just not everybody is tapped into that, and so that's why when people are talking about all these different things in the environment that are affecting us, people should really keep an open mind, because when you start to activate, you are tapping into, you're becoming more and more sensitive to all the things in your environment. And it's not that, the people that don't feel it aren't affected by it. They're affected by it too. It's just they can't feel it, right? So this is why it's important, especially if someone's going through an activation, like listen to what they're saying. Like their speed is, speaking truth. It's just people are tapping into things at different times, and we just need to stay open to the wisdom that's around us. So when we expand our electromagnetic fields, especially if we're extremely, if the heart has opened, like it's gonna hurt. There's gonna be so much pain, because you're also absorbing the feelings, and being in that compassion with those around you, and sharing on that level, like sharing light on that level. You're going to attract tons of different entities, shadows, different alien species that are going to try and feed off that, right? So just as there's parasites within our body, there's little parasites, there's little things, organisms, there's little things that are kind of feeding off us. Well, we're also feeding off other energies, and we're not aware of it. So I don't want it to make it sound like it's black and white, because yes, we have to look at coming into balance with everything. But the word parasite, can often be used as in narrative warfare. And, I mean, we've all gone through times where we're like, this person is very parasitic, and just to mention, if, for example, if anyone is communicating with a fake, like fake Facebook profiles, or communicating using a fake email address, like, I'm sorry to tell you, but that's parasitic. You're being parasitic, because if you're in the light, like truth and transparency exist in the light, right? So anything that can't come forward in the light is something that hasn't been integrated within that person. And essentially, that means that there's an aspect of yourself that is eating away at you, right? So anything, like, you never want to stoop to that level. You always want to come forward completely in transparency. I would never work in that fashion. I would never send a message to someone from a fake profile or fake email address. Like, that, to me, that, like, it's just like, I'm strong, and I stand in my energy. I stand in truth and transparency, because I'm integrated. I'm like ensouled. I'm a soul coming forth. And so whatever these energies are, that kind of are parasites within that person's being, like, they're going to cause all sorts of strange behaviors. And so when your light body activates, you draw a lot of parasites towards you. And this is the challenge that people have to go through. It's always the battle. And one really important clue in managing all of this, if we understand the way the universe works, is that once your light body goes off, boom, all of a sudden, a lot of the shadows and the parasitic energy within the self gets projected out. And then we have to heal that. So even once we've healed that and we've come to know our own shadows, we still have to understand that the universe is going to be testing us constantly. And that's how we can learn to play with it. So if you have an energy coming at you that is parasitic, for example, that's just kind of like, trying to diminish your light, because a lot of this parasitic energy feeds off emotion. So, if someone comes to you in the shadows, and of course, anyone who, comes in the shadows is going to be trying to feed. It's very vampiric energy. So then, you'll receive like a message from someone, and then in the past, I would let that vampiric energy just like because I'd start to bleed out emotions. But once you practice the armor, start creating, really gaining strength and projecting your plasma to create a really strong force field around you with armor and protection. Like, these parasites can't get at you anymore, but they are still showing you that there's something in terms of your behavior, your focus, maybe like a hybridization. There's a part of your consciousness that is connecting to something that is not beneficial for you. And it will have nothing to do with that person or that energy coming in. It's going to have to do with something else. And that's where, learning to read the web, really the web of weird, like really, it's something that develops over time. Understanding those synchronicities and the correspondences. It's, because they're definitely not linear, and they're very dynamic, but over time you learn to see. So if something is coming in at one end and you want to correct it, very rarely do we correct it through that specific thing. We're balancing the energy somewhere else, and then you have to find where that leak is, or where that hole, that energetic hole is, somewhere else, and where you're creating the circumstances for it to come in at the other end, right? So we're constantly just shifting and balancing energies that way, and learning to really master things, so that eventually we're just functioning on a higher and higher level, and we're not dealing with the same challenges anymore, and we're able to create more efficiently and more aligned with what it is we really want, which is like the fun part, right? So once once you've healed a lot of these things, you can, whether it's past life trauma, past life, karma, or things within your bloodline, like, you really start to feel whole, and you can start really enjoying yourself, and being in that vibration of self-love. And then that's where you can get into the preferences, like, what is it that I really want to attract, that I want to go after, that I want to, bring forth in this world. And then that's where it gets really exciting, and then the more you put this energy out, the more you're going to have these little tests come in, like people like bing, bing, trying to kind of also enjoy, like, the whole purpose is that, these different energies want to have that as well. Everyone wants to have, come to a place of integration, come to a place of wholeness and healing. But you have to always have compassion, but you cannot take any shit. Take no shit. Have strong boundaries. And that's what allows other people to heal. That's where the discipline comes in. If you have a gut bacteria that's like driving you nuts, and just affecting your life, like, you have to have strong boundaries, which equates to discipline to eliminate certain things, right? So don't take any shit, have strong boundaries, have strong discipline. And then creating from here doesn't enable anything that is not aligned, or that does not have your well-being in mind. It doesn't enable them, right? Because if you don't find those points that you need to strengthen within yourself, then essentially you're enabling what you don't want. Is this, again, it's this law of correspondence. But so each time we interact with different people, we have the opportunity to learn about different things about ourselves. And by the way in which we interact with them is really, like, the keys are within that, and within the responses that we're getting from the universe. So playing with that energy is really important. And maybe I should just discuss quickly. So, that one of my friends who came forward and was interacting with these different species that had negative intentions, whether that was dark factions of the Greys or dark factions of the Dracos. the less that you address those species, the less that you kind of, take ownership of what's happening and have the conversations that you need to have in order to come to reconciliation, come to an agreement on, what is allowed, what is not allowed. These factions can take over more and more, and that's where the term implants comes in. Like, these bigger species can literally like implant things into us. And I've had implants before, and when these implants were removed, I felt the psychic surgery happening. Like, I literally felt like the removal. And that's the thing with a lot of feelers, is we're very descriptive because we feel things. So, explaining things with language and, using different words, there's many different words, many different ways to explain one thing. But if you're a feeler, then you can literally feel these things taking place within the body. And the more you feel them, the more that your body can actually respond to them and can manifest different things. So, so if you have these different alien factions implanting from within their consciousness, from within that family of consciousness, their intentions for you. So an implant is basically, a physical manifestation of, it's like a remote control that they would have that would dictate your decisions, that would dictate what you're doing with your time, right? So it's like they take over, they control, they can even try and reprogram or program a certain part of your brain to do what they want you to do, right? So if you don't take care of that and you don't do the healing work, what's going to happen? You're going to end up working for these institutions, working for these different galactic races, doing dirty work for a bunch of, secret space programs. Okay, you could become a spy for different races. You can just be so fragmented and so split and not even realize it. So if you're going and you're, you show up at the local military, you go see the military and you're like, I want to work for you, out of nowhere, you really have to question that. You really have to question why you are seeking, how did that manifest in your reality? And often it has to do with these being infected by different consciousness, by different intentions, through very sophisticated means. And if I bring it back down into like a very practical understanding of things, is we could just look at different softwares that are being used, right? Different apps and the psychotechnologies being used. Some of the psychotechnologies can actually create the circumstances within someone's biometric field to go and commit suicide, for example. Like, it's very powerful. So you have to understand that it doesn't, implants aren't necessarily, there is possible abductions from higher species that take place. Just like we can go in with a microscope and we can extract a small little, living organism from the body and then, do experiments on it. Well, yes, that does occur with bigger species than us, but often implants are happening by means that are non-invasive, but that are just as effective, if not more, right? And it's kind of like a virus that eats away and creates certain outcomes and creates certain behaviors. So we're having to seal off any like remove any implants and also seal off any rifts within our work fields that might allow different entities to enter. I could just go into like I got a lot of information on this that I've never brought forth, but All this to say is that when this cycle comes in and it's starting and it comes in, like, if you haven't done the healing work, you're just going to get, there might only be 10% of who you are left and 90% having been taken over. So you really have to fight at that point for who you are, for the consciousness, like your soul family essence, and to eliminate any other agendas that might be attached to your field that might be controlling you and dictating your thoughts and behaviors. So so when we start activating the Taurus field, and it's way more pleasant when you go through a slower activation than if you go through a speedy activation, because it's very difficult to navigate, and it's not as easy to control what is happening, because we are working from the astral and from an energetic perspective through plasma projection, creating this field around us that manifests things into our reality. And so when you're going through that stage, if you haven't at least become familiar with how to navigate before it happens, or if you haven't done the work and then it happens again, like, you just start manifesting the craziest stuff. Like, I had a car, like, when I was at my peak height experience, and then I just got totally infiltrated and targeted by tons of different institutions, entities, like, you name it, because they don't want you to start piercing these other veils, and being able to have that sight to move into the bigger and the lower. They want to keep you here in Midgard, which is essentially, we want to come into wholeness here, so we don't want to be spending time in these higher and lower dimensions, but it is a natural process to go through, like this ascension process. You come down into really ground into the physical, and then we're going to be moving back up into these, reintegrating these higher dense, these less dense energies. But anyway, so when I was at my peak state, like, there was literally I'd manifested a car. It's like, it's okay, the license plate said undercover on it, and it was parked right in front of my house. There's no parking spot in front of my house. It was parked there for like days. I think it was like a week, and it was right at that peak state, and I had started manifesting all this crazy stuff, and it's like I had to literally, like, ask people, like, is that really there? Because you can easily think that you're going crazy, but that's where navigating this stuff is coming to the right people, going to see the right people that will help you understand the language of what is happening, and help you navigate, and understand the universal laws is really important. If you're just going to go see a regular doctor, and that has no ancient wisdom codes within them, like, they're just going to put you through the ringer and most likely put you on medication or something. But it's a really important phase that we go through, and when we truly start to understand our power, most often we don't see that we're manifesting things at the beginning. Once we do, if you misuse that, those gifts will be taken away from you. But we go through that phase where we don't realize that we're manifesting things, and we start manifesting the craziest stuff. So that's why going into victimhood really doesn't make sense. It's really about learning how to, doing the healing work, and then learning how to wield that power, to start creating for the benefit of all, right? So taking no shit, but tapping into the highest intentions for as many people as possible, and also doing what you've come here specifically to do on your soul journey, right? We all have our unique missions that we're here doing. So yeah, no one is going to come and steal my life force. Like, this is a mantra that we should all be repeating. And the generators and the manifesting generators are producing energy, and some of us produce more energy than others. So it's really important to ensure that no one is hijacking that energy, right? Because if you have different factions come in and hijack that energy, you're going to start producing their narrative. You're going to start producing what they want. And not only that, they will just come and literally, like, you know, I've been hijacked by certain entities that just will come in and like seriously try to drain you. And that's actually what the whole agenda is with the AI, you know, having different people basically working for artificial intelligence. Like, they don't even realize they're on the computer day in and day and night. And what are they doing? They are inputting information for AI to increase AI's capacity. They're a battery for AI. And they are working for AI, and they don't even realize it. So, you know, understanding that no one has the right to take your energy. No one has the right to take your life force. No one has the right to direct your creative juices. You know, you are in control of what you are manifesting, of what you are creating, and you are in control as well at securing your own life force. You do what you have to do. Through some of the things that I discussed, you can reach me at www.inspiringplayfulevolutions.com, and I will, you know, and set up a session with me, and I will help you basically, you know, see where you're at, and then see what we can do if there are any energies just, you know, kind of coming and directing your life force or what have you. So this is really powerful energy coming in April. Everybody's life force is just like boom, it's just blooming, and this is where we can really, like, being on a springboard and about to take that giant leap. And which direction do you want to go in? You know, do you want to have these different institutions, agendas, you know, getting you to work for them, right? Or are you going to be working for yourself? And this is where we really have to question, like, there's so many amazing people out there, but, you know, if you're wanting to work with Walt Disney, for example, like, it smells like CIA to me, right? Like, this is where we have to be very discerning about what is out there and who is working with whom. Appearances are often very tricky, right? And what I've come to understand is that the people that are appearing to be kind of the nicest people, the ones that are working in this beautiful, loving energy, like, they got their hands in a bunch of, like, I don't even know if they know that they're working for certain institutions and agencies. I'm not going to name names, but, you know, I don't even know if they know what they're participating in. And this is what, you know, ensoulment is all about, is really coming to understand, bring our life force into, directed into basically integrating all the fragments of self, and integrating and coming into wholeness, and coming into it's like a more concentrated form of awareness about every aspect of ourselves, right? So if there's parts of you that are working for different institutions and agencies and aren't aware of it, you're going to have to integrate them, right? We all have to do this. So looks can be deceiving, and yes, there's a lot of awesome people out there doing a lot of amazing work and explaining a lot of amazing things, but it doesn't mean that they don't have aspects or fragments of themselves that are still working for darker forces or for darker alien species. I'm just looking over my notes here. I'll dabble quickly into, when we do get targeted by these different institutions, or even by different people that might be aware. You have people who are more evolved and who know how to project their plasma and do very specific things, and even come and steal specific gifts from you. You just know that it is always possible to reclaim, to go and you don't even have to time travel to do this. You can simply just go and retrieve your gifts back through different means, right? And you just have to understand that everything is possible, and then to set that intention out. And there's different types of energies in the universe that are more efficient at doing that, and then working with those energies. So I've been working with this for a long time. Carlos Castaneda back in the day had a really elaborate form of recapitulation, which, allows you to go back and basically suck all of your life force back, suck all of these gifts back. And you can also do it through writing, through spells, and then using the imagination, working with energies in the astral. So anything that was taken from you can be taken back. And I have taken back everything that was stolen from me. So, if these different institutions, entities, people come in and, they're working on they might have a 10% part of their consciousness that is working for dark factions, and they don't know it. And then they come in and they hook into you, or they steal things from you, or they implant different, ideologies and narratives into you to try and steal your life force. All of this can be taken back. And we have to know that this is possible in order to begin to do it. So I know it's possible. I have done it. You can feel when the energy comes back. You shift, basically. You completely shift timelines. You're like, all of a sudden you're like reintegrated, like so many parts of yourself, and just have reclaimed all these different aspects. I'm just reading one of my notes here. The moreover bliss and telepathy, as well as expanded electromagnetic fields. Physics of this explainer end up absorbing so much when our fields are expanded. Yeah, so I'm highly telepathic, and this was one of the gifts as I activated that caused a lot of pain. And we have, part of it is like learning to reduce empathy in order to maintain that gift. If not, you can't have the gift. So I had gone to see someone this year about actually trying to limit the amount of information that I was receiving from my external world, and doing the practice where you're really concentrating your energy into your core, grounding yourself, and working with the elements within your spiral has really helped to be able to turn on and off that gift, so that you don't have to hear everybody all the time. Know how to switch on and off different gifts is also really critical. Like I've been finally able to turn off certain gifts when I'm in specific environments. Like if you know that a certain environment, if you have that gift on, it's just going to be detrimental to your well-being. You won't be able to function properly, then you just need to turn that gift off. And that's a process that takes time to learn. But so learning how to manage all of this, because as we awaken, we incorporate so much that we don't even realize what we've incorporated. It's just when we go out into the world and we're interacting with different people and we see, oh my God, like, there's such a discrepancy in terms of like, how we're perceiving people and how they appear to be perceiving us. And, it was really pretty interesting. I went out quite a bit last week, and there were some, I don't even know what planet I'm on anymore. Like, this is the crazy part. So I'm not going to go into plans for the next year or two, but everybody, I recommend people get out of the city, buy pieces of land together, just start building. Like I've said it so many times, you know, you're either going to do it or not, but everybody's going to have to work together in order to set things up, and that's going to require people to get along. And the only way people are going to get along is if they do the healing work, right? So it's all connected and in tandem, and learning how to manage our gifts and talents and learning how to be of service to each other, not through shadow aspects of ourselves, not seeking to control people or, you know, to have an energetic dominance over people through projecting plasma into their field, but really, like, you know, being in control of our own field and, you know, doing the inner work on ourselves, for ourselves, to continue to expand and then, you know, be able to offer from that space. It's going to be key moving forward. So I think that's pretty much it for now. I went over quite a bit of things. You know, there's so much more I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to leave it at this for now. I'm wishing you all a beautiful second half of April, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.